also have, and I say this as an Englishman, you have political stability, which is incredibly important in terms of maintaining the economic development of the country moving forward. Where I'm slightly more cautious is nothing to do with India and everything to do with outside India.
This is India, a story in the making. And I'm your host, Lavina Tandon.
From being a law graduate from Oxford University to getting an OBE for his contribution in the Indo-UK relationship, my guest today on India, a story in making, is the chairman of UK IBC, that is UK India Business Council, who has travelled to India more than I have, possibly 200 times. Richard Hill, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Thank you.
And a birdie tells me that you cook awesome biryani and you haven't yet invited me.
Well, I'll have to make up for that. I'm not sure whether they're awesome or not, but I certainly enjoy cooking biryanis. My wife doesn't like me cooking them because I make an awful mess in the kitchen. But yes, I found this book in India many years ago. And it's all the different biryanis from the different states and different regions. So huge variety.
So you have, because you wear a lot of other hats, and I have just said UKIBC. When this person sitting here has 3 secretaries, 4 diaries. The 4th one is your home diary.
Yes,
right?
yes.
All your secretaries talk to each other of where
they all talk to each other. They all talk to my wife as well, which is the most important thing.
So she gets the priority on your diary?
She gets the priority and she sees everything.
Oh, great. And then when do you get the time to the 5th diary is that of biryani, and when are you making which biryani?
Well, that tends to be on a Saturday or over the weekend.
Or so is it every other Saturday? It's not fixed.
It's when I feel like doing it.
Okay.
And when I've got enough credit domestically that I'm allowed to do what I want to do.
Oh, I see. So you create so much mess that the memory of that stays for a few weeks, and then it's forgotten, and then we go back. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So, any favorite biryani of yours? You cook about how many types?
There's one from Hyderabad, and I have to say I can't remember the name, but it is a classic one that is served in a wedding.
I can't claim to be a biryani expert, actually. I'm a vegetarian on top of it. Hopefully, it's not. Is it dum biryani or Hyderabadi biryani or something like that?
It's done in a dum, but it's a Hyderabad biryani. The recipe is from Hyderabad.
And how long does it take for you to?
Well, those people who know how to make biryanis, there is a huge amount of preparation work that goes into it. Because one of the things about biryanis, which I love, is that there are layers upon layers of different flavors.
Right.
So I tend to line up all my ingredients on the side, having prepared them all.
Yeah.
And then I work the whole thing together.
So your biryani diary has to be separate on that Saturday. How many hours?
Well, it's probably about 4 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's worth it if there's an amnesia about the mess you create.
I haven't had any complaints about the quality of the food yet.
So we'll get that in the diary.
All right.
Next,
Indeed.
Richard.
Indeed we will.
Brilliant. Now moving from biryani to the country where biryani is made. Richard, over 200 times you have been, some of your hotel staff would know
times.
you.
Yeah, at least 200 times. Sorry, my nose is running, but
that's fine.
Yeah, at least 200 times. I've stayed in a certain hotel in Mumbai. We won't say which one, but for over 250 times in that one hotel in Mumbai. And then you've got Delhi and you've got other places.
My God, you might.
So I tend sometimes to be told that I'm checking into a hotel before I even know about it. Because my office checks me in, they see my name come up. I then get a telephone call and I'm going, hello, what's this? But anyway, no, It's very hospitable. It's very comfortable.
India is king in hospitality, I have to say. Even in the UK, you have so many Indian, this hotel that we are sitting in as well, Middle 8. So very brilliant problems you have actually. 4 diaries, 5 fifth one biryani. Then the great. Let's move to how did you happen to? Did you choose that you're an Oxford law graduate? Did you choose to get into someone becoming an expert in India and Indo-UK?
No, it kind of drifted upon. How did it actually come to pass? I was a banker, all right, and I worked for Rothschilds. And in the 1990, I was working in New York. And it was a time when a lot of the Indian BPOs like Infosys, Wipro, etc., TCS were listing their shares on the New York Stock Exchange.
Right.
I was working for Rothschilds in New York at the time, and I decided that there was an opportunity here for Rothschilds to advise on these IPOs that were taking place. So I got on a plane. Very good friend of mine, Frank Hancock, who lives out in India, was instrumental in persuading me to come out. And we spent a lot of time talking to these major companies. And it was a time when India was really beginning to start to motor.
Yes.
And New York had that feeling of carpe diem, seize the day. India also, Mumbai also had that feeling, and it was just hugely attractive. So that was the reason why I got involved in India. And then subsequently I ran Rothschilds in South and Southeast Asia.
And then, of course.
And then, of course, I moved on to the UK India Business Council. So there is a plan. Whether it was planned or not is another matter. Yeah,
I think you planned it. But at least you didn't get put off the first time you went. You got so. Was it? I mean, when you went, and a very great time to have started your journey because it was in the 2000s. You said 1999 you went for the first time. Yeah. And then the 2000s, we had this boom.
I was very lucky, I think. In retrospect, the timing was perfect because obviously you had the reforms in the early 90s, which caused the Indian economy really to start motoring and domestic industry to really start to become a powerhouse. And so at the end of the 1990s, 1999, beginning of 2000, many of the major promoters were still accessible. So you could meet the chief executive of Reliance, you could meet Mr. Sunil Bhatti Mittal. These people were accessible and you could talk to them one-on-one on business, etc. Now I feel that if you were getting off the banana boat, so to speak, in India, and you're wanting to try and establish relationships with these promoters, it's very much more difficult, not because they are any more aloof, but they are now chairman and chief executive of vast companies with a big infrastructure around them, and therefore much more difficult to establish a direct relationship. So from that point of view, the timing couldn't have been better.
So you have built that relationship and you're able to now.
Yes.
It's brilliant.
Yes.
Also because, this is a very important question then to ask you is that you saw India the first time when there was a buzz happening.
Yep.
And it didn't so materialize. Do you think the buzz that is now about India and everyone going and saying biggest economy, it'll be one of the big superpowers and XYZ, is that a buzz, a bubble that could burst or fizz out, or you see this time is different?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question. I think that all things being equal, and we'll come back to that if we may, if you look at the domestic economy, if you look at the size of your stock exchange, you look at the companies who are so powerful within your country, then clearly you have all the ingredients to maintain the development and to achieve what everyone expects India to achieve, of becoming the second or third most important economic power by 2050. That's undoubtedly true. You also have, and I say this as an Englishman, you have political stability, which is incredibly important in terms of maintaining the economic development of the country moving forward. Where I'm slightly more cautious is nothing to do with India and everything to do with outside India. And India's position in the world, you have Iran, you have the Gulf, you have China, you have the Stans, you have Russia. All of these areas are geopolitically sensitive at this present moment in time. And therefore, that feeds into the policies and the thought processes, particularly as far as your Ministry of External Affairs are concerned. How do you strengthen the relationships, who you should have the relationships with, etc. So I think that is something that one has to keep an eye on. But the fundamentals of India, I think, are still extraordinarily strong.
Very interesting that you mentioned that and the geopolitics and how the world is playing out at the moment with so many tensions and so many quarters. And we have a real sense that there is this world order rejig that is on the anvil. Do you think that could happen, and do you think the East or India would be playing more central role, or at least the Indo-Pacific will be?
I think India will play. I mean, go straight to the point. I think India will play a very much more important role going forward. It is already the fifth largest economy in the world. It takes its responsibilities externally extremely strongly. It is going to, I'm sure, go onto the Security Council in the United Nations. It's become part of a number of the alliances in that Southeast Asian area. So it's externalizing its power, its economic power, I think, in a socially responsible way. Taking its responsibilities seriously, becoming a fully fledged member of the international community. So yes, I think it is maturing. Not to say it wasn't mature, but I think it's maturing even further.
So from then to now, what has worked in favor and what has not?
I think one of the things that works in its favor is clearly the size of the domestic economy. And one of the key strengths about India is its population.
Demographic dividend.
Demographic dividend, yes, but it isn't just numbers of people. It's the quality of the people as well.
Right.
And having worked in India for a number of years, I have huge admiration for the Indian people, be they the man in the street and or the technocrats in the technology companies. There was a time I can remember when I was looking at a project with Mr. Ramadharai from then he'd left TCS but in Tatas, and we were looking at how we could create a center for upskilling and skilling very close to their steel plant on the East Coast. And we were trying to collaborate or get a collaboration between the Tatars and the applied colleges and universities here in the UK. And what struck me in that dialogue with Mr. Ramadharai and also with colleagues of his was the ability to conceive and grasp scaling up and developing an idea far faster than we can in the UK. So there were things that we were learning on the ground from the Indian capabilities. So that for me is a huge strength, and it still is the case. If you look at some of the unicorns that have suddenly developed in India, for instance, to give you an example, Ola. I went to visit Mr. Agarwal's factory just outside Hosa, 2 million square feet of factory, 20,000 young people, a 5-acre forest in the middle of the factory. I mean, it is extraordinary. And then, of course, the product, battery, electronic two-wheelers. Great vision. And really, from virtually nothing in a very, very short space of time. And that's just one example.
Frugality and making it work.
Through sheer force of personality, through the lack of fear of scaling, through the idea, taking an idea and a concept and rigorously developing it and pushing it forward.
Do you see this more now with a dose of confidence, or it was always there? Because why is it being so noticed now? Because it must be the same people, really.
I think it always has been there. If you look back in history, and as you know, I'm a bit of a kind of history monkey fan. I have a lot of books on Indian history and other aspects. But you've always had entrepreneurialism in different shapes or forms throughout the Indian history. So I don't think there's anything different. Why you have this kind of speed of development happening is in part because of the industries that we are now seeing coming through, but also it's in part due to the access to capital, the investment that is coming from different sources to turbocharge this development that is taking place. Now, because you're an OBE for Indo-UK relation, I think you're the best person to talk about that. And since we are sitting here in London, I know that it's been going up and it's been improving. What would be your verdict still on the relationship and for the free trade deal? Okay. Yes, that's an interesting question. Let me just take one point. OBE, that was collective effort. Yeah. It unfortunately has to be awarded to one person. Yeah. And Muggins got that. But it was the whole team behind me that contributed to that award being made. I think, sorry, now I've gone and forgotten my train of thought. What was the question you wanted? The question was your verdict on the Indo-UK as present, as it stands now. Yeah. Coming back to your real question about the UK-India trade and the level of trade between the UK and India is increasing. It's almost doubled in the past few years. Clearly, both your Prime Minister and my Prime Minister are very ambitious as to the relationship. And I think that there are real areas where we can collaborate. And that's not just exports of whiskey, but it's actually about things that fundamentally make a real difference to our two societies. So I'm thinking about things like defense. I'm thinking about areas such as artificial intelligence, development of artificial intelligence around that. I'm thinking about areas such as sustainable fuel, sustainable energy. These are areas where both, I think, countries are absolutely aligned in the direction that they're wishing to go. And so there are areas of collaboration there, both in terms of setting the foundations, in terms of getting the standards aligned, such that we're talking the same language, but also working together on developing the supply chains in these areas, which will actually benefit both countries. Not happening, though, yet. I think it is happening. I think the free trade agreement, which both sides are working diligently on, and my fingers are crossed and virtually everything else is crossed to hopefully it will be able to be got over the line in not too distant future. I think that will be a real catalyst to not necessarily to companies who are already invested in the UK and or already invested in India, but those companies who possibly occupy positions elsewhere within the supply chain who aren't in each other's countries and who need that, if you like, that example to make those investments and developments.
Do you think, post-Brexit, do you think this could be also a contributory factor? That once upon a time, this was a 500 million big UK-Europe market, and now you have the 500 million going the other way, which is with India, and they don't really think that's that big a deal for us. But for UK now, that is a big deal to get that agreement. And with Indo-Pacific has been it's a tilt that happened post-Brexit, especially with Boris Johnson.
Well, I'm not going to jump into a discussion or argument about whether it is simpler to have a free trade agreement with an entity which comprises 28 or however many countries, or whether to do it on a bilateral basis between UK and UK and India. But what I do think is that the relationship between India and the UK and UK and India remains extremely strong. I'm not talking about the history, I'm talking about the culture, I'm talking about the language, I'm talking about the legal side, I'm talking about the finance.
Yes, common law. It's common law. Yes.
And if you superimpose on that these areas where I see collaboration development in a way that is mutually beneficial, then I think that's extremely strong, and I'm pretty confident that will happen.
No, I'm sure, absolutely, and it should as well. I'm saying, has UK had to work harder for the deals now, post-Brexit?
I'm sure that they have had to work harder. I wouldn't know whether that is because of Brexit, which I think is what you're asking.
Yes.
I think it is because overall competition from different countries is ever more intense. And therefore, if you're looking at food and beverage, you're looking at pharma, you're looking at all sorts of different areas and activities. Competition in these come in from France, they come in from the United States, from Australia, whatever. And there never has been a divine right for India to accept British or Britain to accept India. But what there is now is, as I said, this competitive tension and need to justify winning that contract is ever higher.
And much required now, I suppose.
And much required. And, if you're going into a government contract, then, the quality that you have to put forward, the technical capabilities, not just in terms of producing the goods initially, but servicing going forward. These criteria are now pretty much universal across the world. And therefore, to a certain extent, the need to be on your best, put your best foot forward in order to win the contract is really very intense
and very important. I'm not asking you to have a wand and say and whatever, but I'm sure UKIBC is involved a great deal. Do you see
in the FTA?
Yes.
We don't have a seat at the table, I am pleased to say. They've had, I believe, 13 or 14 negotiations.
I know.
I have to say that I also know many of the negotiators around the table, and I have huge amounts of admiration for what they're doing.
Okay, I thought you'd say sympathy.
I should say sympathy, but you have Kemi Badenoch, you have Piyush Goyal.
Yeah.
These are two very professional politicians.
Yes.
And they're fighting their corners, as one might.
Yes.
It's entirely appropriate.
Yeah.
But I hope that we will come out with a deal that is. You will not satisfy everyone. I mean, that is going to be, unfortunately, the one truthful thing I probably can say, or one thing I can say with absolute confidence, that you will not be able to satisfy everyone.
Yeah.
But I do believe that everyone is entering into these negotiations with the best faith.
Best faith and best interest of either side.
Yeah.
Of course, everyone has to fight their own corner indeed.
Yeah.
Isn't it? That's quite important as well. Okay, so now what are the challenges that you see with Indo-UK at the moment?
I think that the major challenges are around areas such as education. And particularly, I'm not talking about visas, all right? But I am talking about the ability and willingness of content to be delivered in the right way to the betterment of the maximum amount of people in both countries. And I know that my views are somewhat contentious in certain areas, insofar as a lot of people focus on how many students come here, and that's important, all right. And the education that the limited number of Indian students coming here get is extremely useful and helpful, and hopefully they go back to India and contribute to the economic development of India. Where my focus really is how can we enable content to go in the right way from an economic point of view, a price point of view, as well as, the actual educational importance into India, because it's sort of like an iceberg. 1/10 of the iceberg you see above the surface, and that's the 1/10 of people who come here to the UK. But in fact, the need is much greater. It's the 9/10 that are below the surface, who are in India, who have the ambitions that young people have in India, quite rightly, and who want to get on and achieve the things that their parents didn't have the opportunity to achieve. And if India is going to get to become second or third largest economy in the world by 2050, then it really does need to empower its youth who are ambitious and really are deserving of it.
Absolutely. That the highest younger population, if I can think. India has a very, very high percentage of their population that is young.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a challenge as well as a benefit, I would say. But I see where you're coming from. But at the moment, I think UK is really struggling with the pressures of so to say, I'm bored of saying it, but cost of living. And that has escalated with more wars on the corner. Why does it still remain where people would want to come?
Predominantly because we are still an extremely open society. If you're wanting to come here and set up a company, you're wanting to come here and work in a company, it's extremely easy to do. Obviously, we can have a discussion about visas, but
the ease of business is
the ease of business is very high.
I was about to actually ask. That was mine. You led me into it. Ease of business in India was always a lot of the time a sticking point. Has it improved?
Oh yes, hugely. I mean, one slight disappointment, if you like, is that the World Bank still doesn't produce its annual ease of doing business ratings, because if you recall, the development and the progress that India had made was very much in line with the development and progress of India's own economic performance. So when we no longer have, if you like, a benchmark World Bank survey, we no longer have a survey internationally recognized to measure progress. But we do a survey in the UK India Business Council every year, have done so since 2014, in which we ask a variance of the same questions around ease of doing business. And consistently, every single year, there has been an improvement in the operating environment. You had GST coming in, you had increased level of digitization in terms of permissions, you've had a reduction in the relative level of corruption or graft. All of these things are feeding through. And I think that, hats off to the Indian government for coming up with the concept of competitive federalism, for instance, where individual states now really do have it embedded in their psyche and policies that they have to give a better operating environment than their competitors. Otherwise, the company will go to another state to set up.
Yes, of course, the state competing with each other to provide a better platform. Yes, that's indeed. So if a company was to come to you and for consult to go and do business in India, what are the 3 things you'll tell that company?
It basically starts off with, what is your product? Okay? Because in certain areas in India, there happens to be probably a greater concentration of qualified workforce. The second area, so qualified workforce based on product, number one. The second is geographic support that comes from the individual states. Certain states have land banks. Certain states do not have land banks. It's interesting that those states with land banks, significant land banks, are by and large the states that are most economically developed. So what are the incentives to move to an individual state or not? And the third area that I would talk about is get your pricing right.
You're right. It's quite competitive. Okay, so the 3 things that have improved in the ease of doing business in India, and how many notches in UKIBC eyes has it gone up in the past decade, let's say?
Yeah, well, I think one thing is the relative decline, significant decline of corruption. And that has been helped by the fact that a lot of permissions, a lot of interactions with state government, with bureaucrats, with central government is done via digital portals. Digitization. That's huge. Taken the human element out of the equation.
Right.
And the third is GST. Those would be, my view, the 3 things that are absolutely fundamental. You can add other things like the improvement of electricity, telephony, communications, data flows. All of this is, if you like, an indication that India has become a really 21st century economic power.
Going forward, what are the challenges or the improvement areas of improvement?
Areas of improvement, well, rather like my school reports, good term, but can always do better. And if you ask anyone, I'm sure that they will say, yes, well, we can improve this area and we can move in that. I think that India, to a certain extent, is still an extremely bureaucratic country.
We've inherited.
You perfected. Let's get this one right. You perfected.
You perfected it. Okay. I see a lot of bureaucracy here as well, and things move very slowly.
Yeah, but you know what it's like.
Yes.
You're in your own.
Well.
You're in your own country, and you don't necessarily see all the bad things.
Yes.
But no, I think that there is a lot of bureaucracy. There is a lot of complications in your legal systems.
That could be streamlined.
I mean, that isn't necessarily a business thing per se, but it is undoubtedly a drain.
Quicker justice. Yeah.
I think that's right. Dispute resolution. Simplification of dispute resolution. There's been a lot of discussion around intellectual property, but actually I think that India introduced a pretty recognized form of intellectual property protection. So, yes, there are areas where there can be improvements. I'd like to see a number of states having faster transit to airports. I mean, when were you last in Bangalore?
I haven't been to Bangalore, actually.
Oh, there you go.
Ace it.
I can tell you that getting to the Bangalore airport, or getting to Delhi airport, or getting to Mumbai airport, Mumbai is slightly better, actually. Traffic.
So the infrastructure is bad. Transit, yeah.
It's the infrastructure transit, which I think is...
There has been improvement. It needs more. Yes, of course. It's huge.
Yeah. But if you look at the growth, which is an indication of the wealth of the country, growing wealth of the country, the number of people who are travelling by plane now is really quite extraordinary.
Okay, last one. When we are talking of competitiveness and world order, and we have to talk of China and India.
Right.
Compare. Tell.
Well, I'm always of the belief that comparison between China and India is not entirely appropriate. Right. And let me just explain that. Yeah. If I'm a business person and I am going to set up a factory, my first and foremost thought will be, where is my market? Okay, where am I going to sell the goods I produce? Some of them will go internationally for export. A lot of them will go domestically into the economy. And therefore, to a large extent, India is far more attractive because its domestic market is so large and it's growing so fast. The other area that I would talk about is regulation, interaction with governments. It's quite interesting at the moment how many companies are shifting their supply chains from China to India.
Why?
Because the operating environment in China is becoming more uncertain and more heavily regulated. The state is becoming more involved indirectly. And therefore, it is a shift that is reflecting the changes in dynamics almost of ease of doing business and operating environment. And again, that is a sign of the maturity that is coming through. In India, it is a sign of the fact that you have had political and economic stability for a period of time, which has allowed reforms to be embedded into the system and for the benefits to come out of the other side. So if I was going to make not a comparison, but just a comment, that would be that's how I phrase it.
Brilliant. Just out of curiosity, and for me learning it, because you read so much of history.
Now you're going to test me, aren't you?
Another comment. It's not fact check because I have no book to check against. Would Churchill have thought really that India would have come this far? There was a doubt, isn't it?
No.
Is it true that there was a doubt? There's always this rhetoric that has been fed to a lot from all that he doubted the fact that India would do that well.
Isn't it Henry Ford who said that history is bunk, which actually was probably one of his more stupid statements. Probably going to get into trouble for that one. But if you look at pre-industrial revolution, so 1750, the size, and you combine India and China, they together were the very large part of the global economic power. And it's only been a period of, let's say, 1750 to, let's say 2000. So 250 years in the entire span of global history where the role got reversed. And that was purely to do with industrialization. So what you're coming to now is in my view, is a kind of reestablishment of the status quo ante, which is where you have China and India occupying very, very significant economic positions in the global economy. So I think that concerns which were expressed previously as to whether India would catch up, overtake, be left behind by China, I think are now well and truly misplaced. And why do I say that? Because it's going to be very interesting this century to see the impact of the decline in the Chinese population, which is projected to almost halve by 2050. At the same time, India is still going to enjoy its demographic dividend.
Which they have to make the best of.
Which they have to make the best of. Okay, which they have to make the best of. So I think if there was a concern, it wasn't that India could not achieve its potential. It's when it was going to achieve its potential. And I think what we're seeing now with the level of relative growth, that it's certainly on track.
Your verdict on G20 in India?
I thought it was great. All right. I thought that from all sorts of standpoints, it ticked the boxes. Perhaps, some of the statements were not to everyone's liking.
Yes. Well.
But I think that it demonstrated, again, it's another demonstration of how far India has come in the past.
And your last word on Indo-UK relationships going forward?
Look, I'm positive. It's not because I'm chair of UK IBC, it's because I've been a student of India. I'm still learning. I'm a student of India for many years. I think I hold quite strongly to the belief that there is more that we can learn from India in certain key areas. I think we need to continue to recalibrate and think and understand what is India, because India is not the same as the UK. It's not the same as developed nation, whatever a developed nation is. I honestly believe that there is complementarity there, which we can continue to exploit and develop.
Thank you. Okay, so we do a high five India section in which I'll ask you a rapid fire 5 questions.
All right, okay. Do I have to hand back my OBE if I get it wrong?
No, I would be great. I would be more generous. And I'll give you a high five in the end.
Irrespective of what the score is?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And that's your reward. That is absolutely at par with OBE.
Okay.
All right. India for you in one word.
Great.
And since you read so many history books, if you could trade a place with one historical figure, who would that be and why?
I know exactly who I want, but I can't remember his name.
Tell me.
It's a painter.
MF Hussain? Okay. Why him? And what will you...
Why? Because I just think creativity in that sort of way is a God-given gift.
What would you ask? What would you ask him?
Why did he paint? How did his style evolve into that? Why did it go that direction?
I did this last interview, by the way.
Did you?
I did. I didn't know you have his
we didn't talk about this beforehand.
Yes.
So I was thinking about politicians. I was thinking about kings. I was thinking about all sorts of different individuals. And I just feel that he probably has had a profound impact on the cultural evolution of India.
Really?
Yeah.
So if you were trading places, what would you do different as MF Hussain?
I'm not sure I'd do anything. I'd go along the same way.
Okay.
Brilliant. You can't really improve perfection, can you?
If there is one. Okay. What is the one most intriguing thing about India?
It's contradictions. It's complications. Those are two things. One of the things I find fascinating about India is that you never stop learning. And I think that's common to whether you're an Indian, whether you're a non-Indian. It's the whole system. And learning about it is mind-blowing.
Okay. India's future for you in one word.
Regret.
Why?
Because I'm 67 and I'm not going to see India achieve its real potential that it deserves.
Well, we wish you long life.
Thank you.
I'm sure you will.
No, I just,
How many years do you give it?
well, everyone talks about 2050.
Yeah.
Whether that's 2050, whether it's 2070, one doesn't really know. But I think that the progression that India can achieve, and I think will achieve, is going to be startling.
And you've been a part of it. That's why I guess I read.
Very small.
Okay. What is the one thing of India that's rubbed on you?
Biryanis.
Biryanis.
Yeah.
And this?
Oh, and that, yes. My wife gets very cross. She'll ask me a question when I come back from India, and I go like that. She doesn't know whether it's yes or whether it's no. So,
but we still get it. Do you get it when?
Yeah, I still get it. I have to practice a bit now, but no.
You're going to India now, so you will get.
I'm going to India very shortly. Yes.
You did brilliantly well, Richard.
Thank you.
And since you're calling me for a biryani, and I will come.
I look forward to it.
One more. Thank you very, very much.
No, thank you.
Brilliant. It has absolutely been a pleasure talking to you, Richard.
It's been lovely as well.
It's always been, and it has been now as well. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much
Story
indeed.
in making.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was an astonishing and amazing chat that I had with Richard. And of course, I have secured an invitation for biryani to his house. It's vegetable biryani, Richard, just to let you know.
Yeah, well, my wife's vegetarian, so, you can... Yes, okay.
Okay. That's it. Having secured a biryani invitation to Richard's house, I have to say a huge thank you to this beautiful hotel, Middle 8 Hotel, which actually is the place where the great Pavarotti played for the first time outside of Italy. And the food here is also quite amazing. So I've had it. So thank you very much, Middle 8 Hotel. And please do join in on another episode, on another journey to India of a person who has an India connect and has a lovely story to tell himself or herself as well. So thank you, take care, and God bless.
Listen to my podcast audio on Apple, Spotify, Binge Pods, or wherever you get your podcasts from. And watch the video of the podcast on my YouTube channel, Lavina Tandon. New episodes are out every Sunday.